Gentlemen, welcome to the Leawood Planning Commission. Call the meeting to order for Tuesday, November 28, 2023. Secretary, call the roll, please.
Commissioner Carlberg. Present. Commissioner McGurran.
Here.
Commissioner Belzer.
Here.
Commissioner Hoyt.
Here.
Commissioner Coleman.
Here.
Commissioner Block.
Here.
Commissioner Stevens.
Here. That's 7 present. We have a quorum this evening. Up next is approval of the agenda. Everyone should receive the revised agenda on the dais. Staff, is there any changes to the agenda?
No, the revised agenda should be correct.
Okay. Have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Commissioner Block?
Second.
Move for approval of the agenda.
Commissioner Block approves. Commissioner Hoyt second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against nay. Approval of the agenda is 7-0. Up next, over the last 48 hours, 24 hours, we've had 2 resignations, one from our chairman, Mark Elkins, and the other one from Commissioner Sherry Guyed. Both of them have resigned to take their seats on the city council next month, and Mark is mayor. And because we had such a shortened time frame with the resignations, usually the people on the commission have at least a chance to say goodbye to everyone in person. I want to give Mayor-elect Elkins that opportunity tonight. So with that, I will turn the floor over to Mayor Elkins to come up and give us a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I find myself in an unusual situation being on this side of the dais, but I wanted to, oh, by the way, Mark Elkins, 13020 El Monte, Leawood, Kansas, as a citizen of Leawood and as the immediately resigned chairman of the Planning Commission. I just want to take this opportunity to publicly thank the Mayor Dunn, the commission, and the staff for all of the great work that you all have done with me over the course of the last 18 years. It's hard to believe that that time has flown by. I started to sit down today and try to count all the different planning commissioners that I've served with, and I didn't have enough fingers or toes to do it. But I'm very grateful to all of you for the opportunity to have served with you. As you know, I have an abiding interest in serving our community, and this opportunity to serve on the Planning Commission and ultimately as chairman put me in a really unique position that I treasured greatly to watch our city grow. And as many of you have heard during the course of the campaign, the first night that I was on the commission, we were looking at an 11-story building where Town Center Crossing is now, and with the help of the community and the commission, that was reduced to what it is today. It's Town Center Crossing, and from there we've gone on to watch great things happen with the community, and all that is a result of the work that you all have done. And I just wanted to again thank you for the way that you have all conducted yourselves. I leave confident in the idea that during the course of our deliberations, the thing that has guided each one of us in casting our votes has been the sincere feeling that what we're doing is for the best interest, best long-term interest of the citizens of Leawood and of Leawood as a community. And as we've gone about our business, it's always been a pleasure to have served with you all, because you've all shown that even in this day and age, and it's kind of become more and more unusual, that it's absolutely possible to disagree without being disagreeable. And you have all shown the decorum that I think is so important in the public deliberations of public bodies. And I just wanted to thank you again for your ability to work together to come to a consensus, and where a consensus couldn't be found, to find those areas where we could agree and identify those areas where we disagree, and then make our recommendations to the City Council. To the staff, I want to give my thanks as well. It's hard to believe that we've worked together, Mark, for the last almost 20 years. Again, time has flown by. Some of us have come and left and come back again, and we're very grateful that she did come back. And for some, I haven't had the opportunity to work that closely with. But again, the professionalism that you all show every day, you take questions from a chairman who oftentimes didn't know what he was talking about. You took the questions from the public. You took the arrows sometimes from the developers, and through it all, you maintained your professionalism. And as chairman of the commission, I couldn't have asked for anything more. So with that, I will take my leave. My thanks to all of you, and I look forward to working with you all as mayor during the next 4 years. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your time.
Mark, before you leave, I just want to publicly say we did receive an email from Mark Elkins to the fellow commissioners and staff, and you requested that be put into the public record, and we will do that in the minutes tonight, if you could. I would also like to say something that I know Mark has been on the Plan Commission for 18 years now. The last 8 as chairman, and I've been fortunate to serve under him as vice chair for 4 years during that time. Mark has been a mentor to all of us at the dais. We've learned so much from him, and he has taught us a great deal. And I know we will miss you on this body. I will miss you personally with your expertise that you brought to us every meeting. But I know that it's a good thing to have you on the city council as well, and as mayor chairing that board. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very grateful for that.
With that, I'll open it up if anyone on the Planning Commission would like to add any comments.
Well, I think we could go on and on all night long. So I think you know how we all feel about you and how excited we are to see you as mayor, but we'll miss you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you all very much. I'll let you get to the business of the evening.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
I also extended an invitation to Commissioner Guyed, Councilperson-elect Guyed, to address us. She could not make it this time. She'll try to make it to the next meeting as well. With that, with the chairperson being vacant, according to our bylaws, it states, in case of a resignation of the chairperson, the vice chairperson will become the chairperson until the next regular election, which in our case is the first regular meeting in the month of March. It also goes on to say, in the event the vice chairperson resigns or she replaces the chairperson, then a new chairperson will be elected at the next regular planning commission meeting, which is this evening. So with that, I will open up the floor to any nominations for vice chairperson.
Chairman,
Commissioner Block,
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Hoyt, please.
is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Belzer. Are there any other nominations? Okay, with that, I will call nominations closed. All in favor of Commissioner Hoyt being elected as vice chairman, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Commissioner Hoyt, congratulations. You're the new vice chairperson.
All right.
Thank you.
Stay healthy, David.
With that, we also have 2 openings on the Planning Commission. The mayor will be looking to fill those in January, and hopefully by the regular scheduled January meeting, we'll have a full house of 9 people going forward. With that, next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes, one from October 24th, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any revisions to this set of minutes? Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes. Commissioner Carlsberg.
Make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes from October 24th for the Leawood Planning Commission.
Second.
Second by Commissioner McGurran. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The minutes for October 24, 2023 Planning Commission meeting have been approved. Second set of minutes for November 24, 2023 Planning Commission work session. Are there any corrections? Is that a yes or?
Yes,
Do you have?
I have several corrections.
Okay, go ahead, Commissioner McGurran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 4, towards the bottom, about 3 or 4 paragraphs up, where it references the houses that we were talking about that have been built since 2020. I think it'd be helpful just to add the word 5. I have 5 friends who built houses in 2020. Just to give, it wasn't one house and it wasn't 20. And then the second comment for me at the bottom of that page, I think we ought to reference that as a build design from, at least 60 years ago. 60 plus years probably is the way to say it. On page 5, under my only comment on that page, I think it should say, it seems like people want a comparable cost to their existing home. I think that makes it more clear. It's not an affordable housing, it's comparable cost, whether that's a little higher, a little lower, whatever, to their existing home. That's what I would change on page 5. And on page 6, I think we should, we've made a reference to the White Horse Villas, and we probably ought to call out on the second sentence, they pay dues for their White Horse Villas HOA and their White Horse Estates HOA. Probably makes it a little more clear. And I was quite low in my estimate. I had indicated 26, and I drove through there the other day to check it. There's 52 of those instead of 26. That's all I have.
Any other revisions to the minutes? Can I have a
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I move for
Commissioner Black?
approval of the minutes from the November 14th study session as amended.
Is there a second?
Second?
Commissioner Hoyt seconds. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Minutes are approved, 7-0 for November 14th. Next item on the agenda is Case 8623, Leawood Development Ordinance Amendment to Section 16-4-3.7, Special Uses Designated. Request for approval of an amendment to the Leawood Development Ordinance pertaining to the sales and storage of propane tanks. That's continued to January 23rd, 2024, as is Case 11523, East Village Phases 5 and 6. Request for approval of a preliminary plan located north of 135th Street and west of State Line Road. That brings us to the consent agenda. Case 11423, ASCENTIST retaining wall and landscaping. Request for approval of a final plan located south of College Boulevard and west of Roe Avenue. Does any commissioner wish to have this case pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, have a motion to approve this consent agenda?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Velzer.
I move for approval of 4901 College Boulevard Mechanical Screening Wall and Landscape Plan. Request for approval of a final plan located south of College Boulevard and west of Roe Avenue, case 114-23.
Is there a second?
Second?
Commissioner Hoyt seconds. All approving tonight's consent agenda, please respond by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, nay. The consent agenda for tonight is approved. That brings us to new business. Case 8923-135, request for approval of a revised preliminary plat and a revised preliminary plan located south of 135th Street and west of Kenneth Road. Staff have a report?
We do.
Go ahead, Ms. Launerberg.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission, this is case 89-23-135, request for approval of a revised preliminary plat and revised preliminary plan. This plan is a revision to the entirety of the 135 mixed-use development, as there was a change to the plan on the east side. No changes are proposed to the development west of High Drive at this time. The project site is currently vacant and is situated south of 135th Street and west of Kenneth Road. The applicant is requesting approval of a revised preliminary plat and revised preliminary plan for a total of 447,727 square feet of construction on 18.25 gross acres for a gross density of 13.8 dwelling units per acre and an FAR of 0.23, which includes a 55% discount on residential space per the Leawood Development Ordinance. Per the staff comments for this case, the residential density is calculated using the net acreage of a site. The gross acreage includes the right-of-way prior to dedication, where the net acreage only includes the parcels without the right-of-way. Due to some confusion on the previous 135 MXD projects between the gross and net area of the sites, the gross acreage was incorrectly used for previous calculations relating to these projects. For this reason, the applicant was relying on the use of the gross acreage for this specific project, and therefore staff is going to be calculating the density for this project using the gross instead of the net acreage. A final development plan has already been approved for the west side of the 135 mixed-use development. This includes 3 mixed-use buildings that house 193 residential units, as well as a mix of office and retail uses. The east side of the development is also proposing a mix of office and retail uses, which is not changing from the most recent preliminary plan submittal. The primary change to the east side with tonight's case is the replacement of what was previously a 100-unit assisted living facility to a 59-unit age-restricted living facility. With the addition of this age-restricted facility, in the place of this assisted living, the square footage of the development will be pushed over the 0.25 floor area ratio and will need bonusing to allow the extra square footage. The developer is proposing the use of structured underground parking, pedestrian amenities, additional open space, and residential discount to meet this requirement. Parking for the age-restricted residential building is required to be 2 stalls per unit, 1 totally enclosed. The applicant is proposing a parking study to allow for a reduction in the overall amount of parking stalls needed for this facility, but is maintaining 1 totally enclosed with the underground parking for the age-restricted building. Surface parking is also proposed for the overall MXD to service patrons of the offices, retail areas, and residential as well. The newly proposed age-restricted living building is to be 59 foot 10 inches tall from grade to the top of the building. The main entrance is located along the east elevation. Elevations are not approved with the preliminary plan, but the preliminary elevations propose a mix of materials for the facade, which include cement board, brick veneer, board and batten, metal roof accents, and asphalt shingles. The elevations for the west side and the retail office buildings of the east side are not proposed to change with this application. A preliminary landscape plan has been provided but is not being approved with this application and will be further reviewed at the time of final plan. Lighting will also be reviewed and approved at the time of final plan. This application meets all requirements of the Leawood Development Ordinance, and staff recommends approval of case 89-23 with the stipulations listed, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Laudenbaugh. I'll get it right. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Block.
So what's the impact of using the gross versus the net? Is it, you said it's the common areas that are the right-of-way?
The right-of-way, so it does remove, I believe the gross acreage is 18.25, and I think the net was about 15.1. So it's about 3.1 acres.
Acres?
Yeah, yes.
And then on the height, I know you said it's not, the elevation's not a part of this approval, but on the reference to this on page 6, I thought that we as a body and then the governing body later approved reducing the maximum height. I know it doesn't really impact this, but I guess just for my own clarification, it still says 90 in there. Hasn't that changed? Or am I not?
Actually, when that amendment went to the governing body, they directed staff as far as to try and tailor that more toward the 135th Street, so that ordinance wasn't approved yet.
Okay, thank you. I have one more, I think. So if this is just for the age-restricted building, you know, on all of our renderings, there are 4 other buildings on the east side of High Drive, and those are not part of this, correct?
So this plan and revised preliminary plat are for the entirety of the development. So you do have plans in there for both the east and west sides. The elevations from the original preliminary plan for the other retail office buildings are staying the same. It's just that there's a pretty good size change on the specific building, so that's why you have a little bit more detailed plans for that one. There was a sheet included, I believe it was the last one, that had the original preliminary elevations for these buildings.
But what happens though, so if this age-restricted facility is built and the office buildings aren't to the west of it between High Drive and this building, what's the access? I guess the front of this building actually faces east?
It does, yes.
So will there be any access to High Drive? And what about, you know, I guess I'm on page C8. And I guess this, you've got the first drive that goes north into this facility, and then you've got another one just behind it. Will that be constructed, and will the third one be constructed, or any of that infrastructure, west of this building?
Right. I may defer to the applicant on that question as far as the timing. They are phasing it, and I believe it's in 2 phases right now. 137th Street will be constructed, so there would be access from the south side. But as far as the internal drives, they may have to speak to that a little bit more.
And I guess it's kind of, with trash and things like that, I don't know where that is on this, since we don't get a,
I believe it's in the underground parking area,
Oh,
and
okay.
they will roll it out to be taken.
I see. Okay, I think that's all I have right now. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Block. Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Carlsberg?
I had a question on page 3, where we talk about the minimum sizes of these apartments, of these dwellings, 775 feet and 946. In a case like this, is that typically the standard actual, or is that truly just a minimum and there are going to be more square footage on some of these?
So our minimum requirement is 750, and that's, you're allowed, I believe it's 20% on that. So the majority of these, I believe it's 85%, are actually bigger. The ones for the assisted living, I think, were up in the range of 1,000 or more. But this does include also the west side, where they did have a couple units that were smaller. So we do have that minimum, and then everything is above.
Any other questions for staff? Okay. All right, at this time, we'll invite the applicant to come forward. Sir, if you could state your name and your address for the record.
Yes, sir. Shane Wright, Real Estate Equities Development, 1303 Corporate Center Curve, Eagan, Minnesota, 55121. I'm a principal with Real Estate Equities, and with our team here tonight, we've got Doug Ubben and Judd Clausen from Phelps Engineering, and Amy Grant from Polsinelli. But I'll do a short presentation, be happy to engage any questions, but thank you for taking the time to listen to our application tonight. I'll pull it up here. Or I think I will. Is that pulling up on your screens?
Yes.
Okay, great. So our application is for the 59 homes for sale senior housing cooperative on the eastern side of that parcel east of High Drive. And the name of the project is Village Cooperative of Leawood, and I was just going to do a short presentation on what exactly that means. Real Estate Equities Development is the name of our corporation. I'll do a brief introduction, but give you a couple PowerPoint slides on what the co-op is and the plan. So we're a Twin City-based company. We've been in business since 1972. I've been there just a little over 20 years. My two business partners have been there 23, 24 years. We've done a little over, we're probably closer to 10,000 homes now we've developed, and 2,000 of those are cooperative homes. So we started doing cooperative homes exclusively 15 years ago. We began doing them 20 years ago. So our start, we worked with World War II veteran farmers is where we started in rural Minnesota. And I'll show you a footprint here in just a minute. I actually grew up in this area, so this is one of the first larger metros that we came to. And we're now up to, we've got 44 communities in 10 states. A little over 700 million in cooperatives that we have developed. We've got a footprint that's pretty vast. It's really kind of based on the need, as we've learned through all the years of doing these. But as you can see, we have a big cluster in Kansas City, a big cluster in Denver Metro. I spent 9 years in Iowa putting together these communities, and basically most of the towns in Iowa, we have a village cooperative. In the Kansas City metropolitan area, the first one we did was actually in Shawnee about probably 9 years ago. But Olathe, Overland Park, Shawnee, Lee's Summit, Northland, and Verona. So we have 7 communities here, and this would be our newest proposed one. And quite frankly, our application tonight is a result of buyers for years asking us if we'd ever come here. I mean, that's really quite simply, we've been asked for years if we could bring a community to Leawood. And we have a seller of the land who is very familiar with our product type and said, you guys are the perfect use for this site. And that's how we got here, basically, long story short, tonight. And we have one in Lenexa too. I'm sorry, that popped up late. So just one picture here, just to give you kind of a depiction. We do small, limited number of homes, communities. This one's from Olathe, kind of at 133rd and Greenwood, 133rd and Black Bob sort of area, if you're ever over in that area. Senior cooperatives have been around for 40-plus years. They began in Minnesota. I mean, it was invented in Minnesota. That model was really just kept in Minnesota. There's about 130 in the country and 90 are in Minnesota. So, it's just, if you're retired in Minnesota, you're basically the community where you go to church, you get on the wait list for the co-op. It's kind of that simple. We set up a cooperative corporation. We sell one share in the corporation for every home in the building. Everything's titled in the corporation. They essentially become their own landlords. We set it up for them. We set up the structure for them. They own a share in this corporation. It's their asset. They run everything on their own. We help them. I mean, we're not on their own. We assist them with this. But the corporation takes care of everything. The corporation pays all their expenses to operate this community. They essentially just split up the expenses. So there is no third party where there's cash flow going to a third party. So they're really nice homes for a really good deal, essentially, because they just share the expenses. The members are the owners. They elect their own board of directors. They have 5 people on the board, and they have a 3-person part-time staff. So that's basically who runs and takes care of this community, along with the management company to assist them in everything they need assistance with. So that's just kind of in a nutshell how they work. It's really a simple form of home ownership. I'm sort of what kind of has amazed me over the years is the same targeted buyer from 20 years ago in Fergus Falls, Minnesota, is the same targeted buyer here today in Leawood, Kansas, or Overland Park, Kansas. It doesn't matter what state we're in. There's just a certain percentage of people, and there's a higher percentage here than normal, but there's a certain percentage of people who are looking to exit out of a home that they don't want to operate anymore, but they don't want traditional senior housing. They're a younger retiree. So the homes are all on one level, underground parking beneath. I think that was one of the first discussions we had with Mark was, your structured parking requirements out there was music to our ears because we always do parking, or pretty much always do parking beneath our buildings. There's a number of things in the community for the people who live there, guest suites for their friends and family, a large community room, pub room, fitness center, reading areas, raised garden beds, outdoor fireplace. Essentially, the number one thing that people love about these, besides the costs, they're very reasonable, but is community. It's why we limit the homes, because community is a huge component to somebody's retirement years. It's just huge. I mean, we've seen it for a long time now. So when people asked us to come, we discovered this location here, and it was an opportunity where we're going to decrease the size of the footprint from what is on your current plan, and lower the number of homes, and we felt like it was a very ideal scenario. So you guys obviously know this location. We'll be working with the staff on the architectural exteriors, but here's just kind of a first depiction of what we're seeing for this community. As the building lays out on the site, I had this on here, so if there are questions, we can pull this up and talk through. But one of the things on the access is 137th, I know it's not dedicated to you all yet, but 137th is in right now. So that's definitely one of the main access points. The only comment that we have for the hearing from the staff report is there was 30 staff recommendations, and we're just requesting a modification to recommendation number 14, which is downspouts to be enclosed. It's a requirement that's more common with commercial or a flat roof building. So with a pitched roof, it's a little difficult, or it's really kind of scares us a little bit, honestly, to bring it back inside the building. So we would just ask that we can work with the city to propose downspouts that would be placed in the right areas, non-impact areas, obviously match the material and colors on the building. And that was our only comment on the staff recommendations. And like I said, I just wanted to keep it brief, but I would be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Just before I open it up to questions, just one confirmation. You did state that you're okay with the 30 stipulations except for 14.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Open up to questions from the commission. Commissioner Block?
I guess I'm just not familiar with this model, this cooperative.
Sure.
So, and going, I don't know if you mentioned it or if I just remembered reading it here in the Interact meeting. You said 150,000, 200,000-ish for a share. Is that, so each unit is a share?
Yeah, so the shares, they purchase a share, and then once the building is done, they sign an occupancy agreement to move into the home they've selected from the beginning. And then that occupancy agreement basically just says they'll cover their portion of the expenses, which are expected to be in the X. And those average shares are probably closer to 240,000 is probably the average share. On that same note, there was a question on the square footage. Our average square footage is about 1,350. Just thought it'd be helpful to point that out.
And then how do they dispose of that, transfer to someone else? What's the, just?
Yeah, how do they dispose of shares in the cooperative? So, so first off, every co-op we have ever completed is full and does have an active wait list. And when they go to sell their share, they put it in writing to the cooperative that they wish to sell their share. And for a lack of a better term, there's a waterfall to that. Some people do a transfer on death directly to a family member to move in. That is something that's probably more common than you would realize. Then they go to the wait list on the inside of the building, because there's often somebody, she said she wants my home when I leave, so you check on the inside of the building, then you go to the outside wait list beyond the building as the next option in the sequence of selling the share. It's a 6-page subscription form to transfer the sale. It's the same form they filled out when they sell it to the next buyer. The value, the transfer value of the share is predetermined every year. So the buyer knows what the transfer value is, the seller knows what the transfer value is. It goes up a fixed 3% each year. So then it's just a much easier transaction to exit on than a traditional real estate transaction. It's nothing against real estate, just a lot of our buyers would prefer to have less real estate risk in their later years.
So, and you might be saying this, but just so I understand, so it's basically is a legal transaction, it's not a real estate transaction?
Correct, it's not a real estate transaction.
And they maintain that equity in the, the 240 or whatever you said they put in.
Yeah.
Next year, they're gonna get 3% more next
Yeah.
year, on and on. Okay, I see.
Yeah, so if their first year is 200,000, if they decide to, I would say average stay, it's a long time. There's not a lot of turnover in these, but say they stay there 10 years, they're gonna sell it for 260 on the back end.
And then another question for you, not related to that, which is I know that you weren't part of the first proposal that came before us, but as it's indicated in the Interact meeting, I think there were 84 units that were thought to be in this complex, and I understand it was a little bit different model than that, and you're only doing 59, and there's you've already had a lot of interest, and half of them or so maybe not spoken for.
Over half of them are spoken for.
So why not, how did you come to 59, I guess is?
Yeah, great question. So I never thought I would get asked at public hearings why limited number of homes, and that's more common now because the need is going up. And what I would tell you is, we started doing these communities obviously a long time ago, and there's a number of things I've learned, but I would say number one, besides value to the owners, is having an extended family and community around them. And so when they have a 50 and 60 and 70 home community around them, it is a difference maker versus 100 or 200 homes. And it's a big difference to them. A lot of people have lost their network over the years, and this becomes their network. And the size, the number of homes, obviously there's math behind determining. We did, 52 in Overland Park. There is math behind the number of homes, but we do limit the number of homes. It's also why we have wait lists everywhere, because they are limited. And I don't feel like, I got into this business because this was going to be a huge need and a growing need. I didn't get into it to maximize the absolute most number of homes we could fit on a site. We want to do something that, we put our own families in these. My aunt and uncle live in one of ours here. And, I want them to feel like, hey, on the back end of this, I'm not taking much risk. I'm really in a place where everything's taken care of. I'm receiving great value out of it. And on the back end, I don't have to worry about it.
So that 50 to 60 is kind of the sweet spot for you guys across the country? Is
Yeah, we did one in an urban Denver site at 74. But here's the other thing I'd also add to it. We have people that have called us for years to come to Leawood. They want it like yesterday. And the larger you go, the longer it takes. That's another factor in this. And we do want to deliver this for people to actually be able to move into, and we want them to be able to do that. So that's a factor, and that 50 to 60 is a sweet spot for that, for sure. Operationally, it makes a ton of sense for them too. Doesn't feel as difficult to operate a 50 to 60 home community versus 100.
Got it. And then just one more question. On the, what I asked staff earlier, so, you're really talking about this development, kind of the east side of the east side
East side of the MXD,
Yeah.
which essentially, my understanding is Mr. Lashbrook came in, and there was quite a history of getting that area developed. And in order to do his part of the development, the MXD was set up in 2018 with a preliminary plan in place for this east side of High Drive. So those are those 4 office buildings you see. That was part of the preliminary plan, and assisted living, 89 homes was part of the preliminary plan on this site.
So what will you do just west of this, between High Drive and the west side of your?
So west of this, where the 4 office buildings are, is that what you're?
Yes, I mean,
Yeah, so that is retained by the Rainier family.
Okay, so how about the drive that's that's at least shown in our plan directly behind, so directly to the west of this building?
Yeah, so there's a drive shown off of 135th west of this property, which would be a shared access to future office. That's the preliminary plan showing the 4 office. And they're not changing. They're not proposing to change that. They're keeping the same plan in place. So there's an access there. And then there is there's 2 access points off 137th. And then east, obviously, to Kenneth, west to High Drive. So there's essentially, multitude of access points for it.
But will those be constructed with this project, I guess?
No, it's for sale. It's for sale. And the Rainier family's informed us they're keeping the preliminary plan in place.
So you only have access the easternmost drive off 137th Street, is that it?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Block.
Mr. Chairman?
Any other questions? Commissioner McGurran?
Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah.
And you've answered several of the questions that I had, so mine are relatively quick and relatively minor. But just for the record, when we talked through the logic of how one would sell their unit, their share, the only thing I had that was related to that was how long does that process typically take, given the interest level?
You mean when they go to sell after they've lived there?
Yeah, let's say you sell to the first owner, if you will, and then at some point that person decides to sell.
Yeah, usually it's immediately. We're not involved in the transaction because it's co-op buyer-seller at that point, but we monitor all the wait lists, so we're seeing how long these wait lists are getting. And generally, the older the community, the longer the wait list. So our oldest community is Fergus Falls, Minnesota. It's probably close to a 10 to 15-year wait list.
As an example, do you already have a wait list at the new one in Overland Park?
Yeah, we had a wait list long before that ever opened. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, so it's usually, it's usually right away. We did 3 of these communities in 08, 09. In rural Iowa, I think we were the only ones doing anything in the state of Iowa residentially. And those 3 communities are our longest wait lists in Iowa. But at that time frame, if someone was selling a share, it was probably just short of, as far as months from selling a house, because it's less costly to buy into the co-op than to buy another house. So it was basically you're exiting out of the share, and it was taking them less time at that time than selling a traditional house.
Thank you. Last question I have is, we have an understanding of what it costs for a person to buy in. What is their typical monthly cost?
Yeah, so the monthly costs vary based on obviously the size of the home and where it's located. They're usually in the range of 10 to 20, 25% below market rents in the area because they're just splitting up expenses. So call it plus or minus $2,000 a month.
Okay.
Just depending, I mean, if they get the largest homes, can be more. If they get the smallest homes, can be less.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And one thing Judd brought up on the access, thanks for bringing this up, was we are building as a part of this development the drive, the entrance drive off of 137th. So if,
I think reference was made to the very eastern driveway only, and that is true, and that's how you get to the garage and the rear parking.
Judd, can you just give us your name and address, please?
Sorry.
Okay.
Judd Clausen with Phelps Engineering, 1270 North Winchester, Olathe, Kansas, civil engineer for the project, along with my partner Doug Ubben.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that I wanted to clarify for Mr. Commissioner Block is it's not just the eastern driveway, but also the next one to the west. So it would have a completed area around the building, including, you know, there's some sidewalk and streetscape improvements on that western side, and we're hopefully excited to bring back that detail to you with the final plan.
microphone.
The western drive is being completed as well.
Thank you. Commissioner McGurran, did you have further questions?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
Okay.
Any
Thank
other
you, Commissioner.
questions for the applicant? I have a couple questions, Mr. Wright. With the parking lot, I noticed to the parking lot, it looks like you're putting in some kind of courts as well. Is that part of your development?
No, they're not pickleball courts. Those are raised garden beds.
Raised garden beds?
Yeah,
Okay.
I get asked that a lot.
Okay. One of my other questions was the location, looks like you have a location in Overland Park that you're building right now. Where is that?
The location in Overland Park's done. It's right behind the Target, 123rd and Blue Valley Parkway.
Okay, that looks fairly big, if it's the one I'm thinking of, is,
I think there's a lot of construction over there.
Yes.
Our building's not very large. It's only 52 homes.
so you're on the
Far west, yeah,
west side
so-
of Blue Valley Parkway?
It would be the northeast corner of 123rd and Blue Valley Parkway.
Okay.
No, it's not. It's actually not right. No. If you look at the Target, it's directly south of Target. So
Okay.
it'd be kind of like the southwest corner of Target,
Okay.
right behind it.
Are there any age restrictions, or is it just a suggested?
Yeah, there is. It kind of depends on the lender that we use. There's two different federal codes. There's 55 and over and 62 and over. And one needs to meet that requirement. So it is definitely age restricted.
Okay, and do you have an age restriction for this?
We're anticipating this to be 55 and over.
55 and over? Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Commissioner Carlsberg?
Talking about ages and such and independent living, and my family's been exposed to some of this in the last couple of years. So many of the trends are to have aging in place in terms of independent, assisted, and memory care, which this isn't. But I'm curious, do you ever partner with organizations that make a transition to other kinds of care easier in any of your other facilities?
Yeah, so I'll give one example on that. In Shawnee, we're at 87th and Johnson Drive approximately, not right there at the corner. And we're right next to an assisted living. And they have definitely helped and provided services. That was one of the first things we did, was talk to them. And you know, if it helps with their FTEs, their full-time staff, to fill their hours if they're not full-time where they're at. But we definitely do make great care that when people go in our communities, they don't feel like a transitional community, because our buyers are definitely not looking for that.
Yeah.
But since they do live there, you know, mostly for forever in their lifespan, you know, each community, we give them the autonomy to, if they want to set something up, but we also provide advice if they're looking for it on, who do we think they should partner with. In some of the communities, like here, since I'm from here, I have a few more connections here to offer that. And then in Denver, they're very, I would say, they prefer to do it more on their own, set up those that sharing of services on their own.
Is that kind of a decision made on behalf of the board at each facility, or is it made by your company?
No, it's made by the board. That's the beauty of these. They have full autonomy. That's another reason they're so popular is they have full control and ownership.
Thank
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman. I guess I've got a question on the civil drawings. That directly north of the facility, it looks like there was an existing curb cut and maybe some paving that's shown there, and then almost like a viaduct wall or a retaining wall that's directly north from the planned facility. Can you tell us more about that? Is that being demolished or?
Yeah, that's an existing facility that Water One had, and they have an easement on that area. They had facilities in that location, and my understanding is that that's been abandoned at this point. We're not proposing to do anything with that. At this time, they still own the easement rights for it, so, they could potentially do something in the future.
So it would stay in place with this development then?
We're not changing that at this point because they own the easement rights for that still, and they have not released the easement.
Okay. I guess the entrance will be revised because of the turn lane.
We would have to pour them a new driveway apron for their facility there, but it's a very low-use driveway just for access for maintenance trucks to get in there.
I see. Okay, thank you.
There's no offices or anything. It's just equipment that was there.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Thank you.
With that, this case does require a public hearing. I will open up the public hearing to anyone that wishes to speak on case 8923. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak? Is there anyone on Zoom? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, seeing none,
Commissioner Block.
I move to close the public hearing.
Commissioner Block has offered to close the public hearing. Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Hoyt, second. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Public hearing is closed. Mr. Wright, usually after the public hearing, we give the applicant a chance to rebut. Is there anything final that you'd like to say?
No, unless you have any other questions.
Okay. All right. Very good. One of the things before we open up the discussion is our favorite topic of downspouts. Want to get staff's opinion on stipulation 14 with the downspouts.
Staff has had a work session with the Planning Commission and kind of dealing with this subject before, and it's our understanding that if it's a flat roof and the water will be collected internally and it doesn't really pose a problem as far as water leakage, at least not as much. Where you really kind of have the issues is when you have sloped roofs that have the gutter, and then the gutter is kind of on the outside and it has to run through this piece of downspout that then returns back inside the building and then runs down through the building that way. And in talking with architects, it's our understanding that that's really where the problems start to occur as far as there's leakages, there's too many joints and those kind of things. I think at the work session, the Planning Commission indicated that it'd be willing to look at residential or look at it on a case-by-case basis, and was probably more supportive on a residential building as opposed to being a commercial building that, in those cases, you'd want the downspouts to be enclosed.
So,
I think with the sloped roofs, that they probably is a risk as far as, water leakage inside.
So may I clarify? So essentially, you would not be averse to removing this downspout stipulation since it is a sloped roof?
With the sloped roof, I think would be all right. I think originally they were talking actually doing a flat roof until the roofing was amended to allow as far as the laminated composite shingles. And now they have a sloped roof. And
Mr. Chair, if I can add something, I'm sorry, Director. Since this is a preliminary plan, we're also looking at non-residential development in this. So I don't know if the Planning Commission wants to make a distinction between the residential building versus the non-residential buildings in their stipulation if they choose to amend it.
Okay, good point. All right, with that, I'll open this case up to discussion by the Planning Commission. Commissioner Block?
Well, yeah, maybe just to add to the downspout discussion, I mean, I think that's what I would prefer, is maybe not remove it, but stipulate that the applicant will work with staff. And I even think the applicant even said, he's willing to do that. But I think that if nothing else, to minimize the downspouts, I think if we were to take it out completely, it could have a lot of downspouts. And I think that to the extent that we can, if they do remain on the outside, that they're at least minimized, the number of them would be my preference.
Thank you.
Okay, can I
Any other
ask
discussion, Commissioner
a
Hood?
follow-up question?
Sure.
So, I mean, right now stipulation 14 says all downspouts shall be enclosed. So if we leave that there, that seems to indicate their downspouts would need to be enclosed. So do we need some sort of compromise language here that, all downspouts on the, age-restricted building having a sloped roof may be on the outside, but all other commercial buildings within the development need enclosed downspouts? That sounds extremely wordy, but I'm sure we could come up with something more concise.
Mr. Klein, what's your feedback?
I think that that's a great idea. And Michelle had an excellent point as far as want to make sure that you limit it to this building. They can work with staff. When they come back for final plan, you'll actually get to see more of the details of the architecture. It'll also allow them to work with staff to maybe have the downspouts in certain areas where they aren't quite as visible, if that's what they want to propose, and then you'd have the ability to actually see what they're doing and decide whether you're supportive of that or not.
Mr. Chairman.
Perfect.
I did want to mention, just cautioning on the use of maybe commercial in the stipulation. So the buildings on the east and west side both are privy to this stipulation. So there are mixed-use buildings on the west side that are residential, commercial, and office. So we just want to kind of phrase it so that we're not changing that, the internalized downspouts for those buildings.
So if we said downspouts on, and what would be a good way to identify this?
The building number?
Building under consideration.
Lot 1?
I think that would be probably the best way as far as indicate the lot that it's located on. I think the other ones that Catherine is talking about are actually on the west side of Future High Drive.
And we might still leave a stipulation 14 in there that would say that the applicant would work with planning staff to minimize the appearance and visibility of the external downspouts or downspouts,
screen.
period.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea.
Now to come up with the wording.
Before any other discussion on this proposal?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one more stipulation note. So we spoke with Public Works and the applicant, and we would like to change planning stipulation number 10 regarding the power lines and undergrounding of those to match with, I believe it's stipulation number 4 from the Public Works memo. So it will just match that, and that will be reflected in the resolution in the governing body staff report.
Okay.
So that's number 4, okay. So are you suggesting that we exchange your stipulation for the Public Works?
Yes, it would be a replacement.
Okay.
You know, speaking of that, I just had a question that reminded me on the fire marshal. His memo, the dates just seem a little bit out of whack. Is the 14th, it's just, he had no new comments based on the previous one. This is just an overlay of a previous report?
The updates he had were actually to a previous memo he had, so he saw the most recent version of each plan that we've had, and his comments were all addressed by the applicant.
Okay, that's what I just want to make sure. Okay. All right, if there's no further discussion,
Well, do we need to make sure the applicant's okay with replacing the stipulations?
we can ask. Mr. Wright, do you have any comments on the stipulations that we're discussing?
Power lines?
The power lines and the downspouts?
No.
Okay. You're okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Belzer.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I see Commissioner Hoyt writing ferociously,
Okay,
so.
so let me just float this as number 14, and I may have the technicalities of the description of the building incorrect. Applicants shall work with planning staff to minimize the visibility of downspouts on the residential building under consideration on lot number 1. Is that the appropriate identifier for what this building is?
That's what it says.
Yes, it is lot 1.
So we're really not saying anything about any of the other buildings, and we're actually not saying whether they're going to be interior or exterior. I guess, you know, under some unusual set of circumstances, somebody might decide to have them be interior to the building, but we're leaving, I mean, we're not saying they can't be external, so.
If you'd like to specify the east side of High Drive as well, you could to be more specific, but I don't necessarily think you would need to.
Okay.
Go for it.
Okay, are we finished discussing?
Any other discussion? I think we're done.
Okay. Then I would like to make a motion for approval of case number 89-23 in 135 development with a change in stipulation number 4 to be replaced by the Public Works stipulation number 4, and a change in 10 to be replaced with number 4, right? Stipulation number 10 in the staff report to be replaced with stipulation number 4 in the Public Works report. And a change to stipulation number 14 to read, applicant shall work with planning staff to minimize the visibility of downspouts on the residential building under consideration on lot number 1, parentheses, east side of High Drive.
Staff okay with that?
I just wanted to verify, is that going to replace the existing 14 or in addition to 14?
You mean number 4, the changing, oh, I'm sorry. It's going to replace number 14, yeah.
Staff is okay with that? Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Belzer. Commissioner Belzer seconds. Commissioner Hoyt's motion. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. With that, we'll call the question. All in favor of approving case number 8923, 135 mixed, request for approval of revised preliminary plat, revised preliminary plan located south of 135th Street and west of Kenneth Road, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Okay, with that, next up is case 9023, Sienna Estates. Request for approval of a rezoning from agricultural AG to planned single-family, low-density residential R1, preliminary plat, preliminary plan, final plat, and public plan located north of 140th Street and east of Mission Road. Staff have a report.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Ms. Crooks.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, before I get started, I did want to call a minor error on page 2 of the staff report under the rezoning request. I noted that, that the rezoning affected the eastern 12.72 acre portion, and that should say western. I just want to note for the record that that will be corrected for the staff report going to the governing body.
Okay, continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Michelle Cricks, Leawood Planning Department. This is case number 9023, a rezoning of 12.7 acres from agricultural to planned single-family low-density residential district, or R1, preliminary plat, preliminary development plan, final plat, and final development plan for a total of 18.2 acres located at 138th Street and east of Mission Road, to be known as Sienna Estates. This project comes before you this evening with a recommendation for approval from staff. The subject property is a remnant parcel from a larger piece of property which has been parceled off over the years, creating what we know today as the Sienna residential subdivision and the Villa Milano apartments. The remaining property is 18.2 acres and is currently unplatted with an agricultural zoning designation, developed with a single-family home, two accessory buildings, a pool, and a tennis court. The applicant was requesting to rezone the western 12.72 acre portion of the subject property from ag to R1 to develop developed 9 new single-family estate-sized residential lots. The remaining 5.5 acres would remain with an agricultural zoning designation, and the existing home and accessory structures would remain. The applicant has proposed to divide the 12.72 acre portion into 9 new single-family lots, averaging 1 acre in size for the construction of new estate residential development. The density of the newly created lots would be 0.7 dwelling units per acre. When we factor in the 5.5 remnant parcel into the overall density, that density would drop to 0.54 dwelling units per acre. The maximum density in the R1 zoning district is 2.9 dwelling units per acre. So with this subdivision, 3 common tracts of land are proposed. 2 would be located directly along Mission Road along the front entrance, and a third would be located along the southern boundary for stormwater detention. The 2 tracts of land off of Mission Road would be for entry features and signage. All tracts would be maintained by the Homes Association. Along Mission Road, the property is currently bordered with a decorative metal fence. That fence is proposed to remain and would become part of the development's perimeter fencing. Within the common tracts of land adjacent to Mission Road, front entry features are proposed in the form of decorative stone walls, shelter features, and landscaping. These features are proposed to be constructed of natural stone and cast stone accents. And on one of the decorative stone walls, signage for the development is proposed. Staff has reviewed this application and determined the rezoning and the plats are consistent with the requirements of the Leawood Development Ordinance. In addition, the rezoning is consistent with the Leawood Comprehensive Plan, which identifies this area for low-density residential development. As I previously stated at the beginning of my presentation, staff is recommending approval of the rezoning, preliminary plans, preliminary plats, final plans, and final plats with the stipulations outlined in my staff report. And that does conclude my presentation, Mr. Chair, and I'm available for questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cricks. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Hoyt?
So you mentioned the 5.5 acre parcel that is not included in this rezoning. And I can ask the applicant this. We don't have any idea what might happen to that land in the future.
No, currently the home and the 2 accessory buildings, the pool and the tennis court will remain as a single 5.5 acre lot. What could happen in the future is unknown, but at this time that will remain as a large single family lot.
Okay.
Anything else? No. Okay, Commissioner Belzer.
Michelle, I see in the staff recommendation it says 9 new single-family residential lots, but then down below in the request, the last bullet point says 10. Is that accounting for the one that's currently there?
Correct. The 10th lot is the remnant parcel, that 5.5-acre lot.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions? Commissioner Block?
I think it's interesting that it's part of the Sienna neighborhood, but it's not connected. I mean, it shares a boundary, but doesn't have any interconnection. Does that exist anywhere else in the city, or is that?
Are you talking just the lack of connection to the, just with the layout of the Sienna subdivision to the south,
Correct.
Tuscany Reserve to the east, those interconnections just aren't available?
Okay, does that exist anywhere else, or is that unusual from your perspective?
I think that in this case, since this is a remnant parcel from larger developments being parceled off over the years, it kind of, there really is no other way to create interconnectivity. Typically, that isn't desired. We always want interconnectivity within neighborhoods, but in this case, it just wasn't possible.
And how does this proposal, how does it line up? It looks like the entrance that exists for the residents now is a little bit further north, and this one will be a little bit further south. And I believe that lines up with a new left turn lane, southbound left turn lane. Is that correct? So you could go all the way across into the development to the west?
That's correct. This lines up with 138th Street into Leawood Meadows, I believe is what that one is.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, so it would line right up with that, and the applicant could probably go to more into this, but I believe that the left turn lane south on southbound Mission Road, that turn lane has been created already.
And so then what happens to the access point that's there today? You know, since it's a new apron for that driveway, and this project's not even finished, the Mission project, would they have to return the curb that would have been there otherwise?
So are you, just for clarification, Commissioner, are you talking about the existing drive that's there for the home?
Correct.
Now? I'm honestly not sure how that curb return is set up, and maybe Public Works can go into that a little bit more as I look over on how that will work. But eventually that remnant parcel, that 5.5 acres, will just take access directly off of that cul-de-sac that's created. But I will let Public Works speak to how the curb cuts along Mission Road.
Brian Scoville, city engineer, and the existing driveway will remain in place until the new access to this subdivision is constructed, and the developer will be required to remove that driveway and extend a new curb across the right-of-way. And usually those details will be handled with the review of the construction plans once they're submitted prior to permitting for construction activity. And but we have coordinated closely with the developer for access to this location, and the developer did agree. Just to be clear, we had initially provided a median break across from that driveway prior to this development coming in. Once this development came forth as an application, we agreed with the developer to close that median break off and create the left turn lane for the ultimate configuration. And the developer agreed that the property owner would utilize the median break further south and utilize make a U-turn motion to access their driveway, to turn back north. If they're headed south, they'll U-turn, they'll head back north and turn into their driveway. So it'll in effect act as a right in, right out until they get the new road built.
Okay, thanks. And then my final question, I think, is for Michelle. Why not rezone this to R1, the remnant parcel, the 5.5 acres? I mean, it looks to be landlocked. I guess the only thing that potentially could happen is splitting that and tearing down the house and dividing it across the east-west. But why? What's the advantage, disadvantage of doing both?
There are currently 2 accessory buildings that exceed the height permitted in residential districts for accessory buildings. Right now, I believe the height, and I'm going off memory, is 15 feet. Both those buildings exceed that height. So what would happen if one of those buildings, say, a tornado, fire, burn to the ground, they would not be able to rebuild back to what that current state is. They would be restricted then back to what the height of that zoning district is. In this case, agricultural districts are actually exempt from that 15-foot height requirement. So they would be able to, if something were to happen to those buildings, they would be able to build it back to that point. So the concern was, would we be restricting the right, current rights of that property to have that put that building back if something were to happen?
Does the ag or R1 designation, does that have any impact on the county assessment of the property?
I honestly don't know. I'm not in that. The county assessors, I believe that they look at how lots, what kind of infrastructure is available, what kind of uses are being utilized on that property. I know there's a whole lot of factors that the assessor's office will look at. Quite honestly, when I was with the county and the planning department there, we'd always direct these same type of questions to the to the assessor's office. There's a lot of different factors that go in.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Block, any other questions of staff? Commissioner Carlsberg.
Under Exhibit B on the Leawood Fire Department, a question. It seems to have been through several iterations. The cul-de-sacs as done on a revised plan are okay with the Leawood Fire Department, and it seems like, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, one cul-de-sac, is there an island there, or is that just part of the schematic over near the existing buildings there? And is that okay with the fire department?
So there's an island on the terminus of the cul-de-sac that's up at close to the remnant parcel, that 5.5 acre, no cul-de-sac on that northern bulb. As the most recent iteration of the plans that fire department looked at, they were okay with that.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, at this time, we will call the applicant to come make their presentation. Mr. Odo, welcome back to the Planning Commission.
Hello.
Please state your name and address for us.
Rick Odo, address 15200 West 105th Terrace, Lenexa, Kansas. I'm acting as developer on this site. As you know, it's a family-owned site that we've had in the family for over 40 years. This site was phase 3 of, do you have the plan that we could show? I figured it'd be here, otherwise I'd have thumb drive. Hopefully you got the overall plan. There is a plan. Mm-hmm. If I can. Okay, that's good enough. This is this is phase 3 of a plan that was approved back in, I believe, 2003. Sienna Estates to the south and Villa Milano Apartments to the north was phase 2, and this was always planned to be like this. So the streets that you're talking about, Commissioner Block, it was approved back in 2003 to be set up this way. We worked with city staff to get that the current homeowner would be able to do a U-turn, go down the street until we get this 138th Street built and the new lots all built in. So we'll work with you on that. That was not a problem for us. The question on jumping ahead on the why we're keeping it R1 is actually what we wanted originally, but we do have a barn there and a pool house. And if we ever remodel the pool house, which is very likely because it's a 40-year-old pool house, we would be restricted to 15 feet. We don't want that in the barn. If it ever had to be rebuilt, certainly couldn't adhere to the 15-foot building height because we do intend to sell it. The intention actually is that we'll still keep, my parents will still stay there for a while. And then if and when they're ready to move out, they can sell the whole lot as one big 5.5 acre estate lot. So our intentions are to keep it the way it is. And the R1 keeps us so that we can have the ag allows us to keep it so we can have horses there, and we can keep the heights if it ever has to be rebuilt, if that answers all your questions on that. And as far as property tax, it's the same. They look at it as a large lot.
Thanks.
The entrance, this has already been set into the Sienna HOA. It was set up in 2003 to accept this when it came in. They're already aware of it and know it's coming in. And I've been dealing with the HOA president and their HOA board, knowing what's going to happen. This will come in and there'll just be 9 or 10 more lots actually paying towards the HOAs. So I don't think there's much more to cover on this. Oh, I do want to bring up one thing. This really goes more towards, I don't know if it's asking for the deviation, it's going to be taken care of on the fourth, the last thing on your agenda, the through streets. This is why we need to have the your code change, because right now, the way this is a through street with a street Mission Road here and this cul-de-sac here. I've got a 50-foot setback eliminating most of my backyard, so we can't put fences up, we can't put pools up in that area unless we eliminate that setbacks that you've got on these through streets that are just coming up. And really right now, because it's an existing fence, we can leave it. We just can't connect our fences going down the side yard to it because it crosses that crazy through street setback. So anyway, I'm just jumping ahead on why that's so important to pass and get changed. Any other questions for me? It's a pretty, this is going to be called Sienna Estates. The other one's just Sienna. This is Sienna Estates, because these are a bit larger lots.
Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Block?
But maybe, Mr. Odo, just to clarify what you just said, I think you're referring to through lots, not through streets.
Through lots, sorry. Thank you for the term, yeah. Thank you.
And looking at some of the comments from the Interact meeting, and maybe now that I kind of look at this again, maybe I understand what you were trying to say, but that you have the option to buy back from, I can't remember exactly how it was written, if construction didn't start in a year. I assume that means a lot owner? Not, I didn't know if that had to do with your parents.
It says in there that if a lot isn't, if a homeowner buys a lot and they don't start within a year, technically I can buy it back if
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
It's rarely ever enforced, to be honest. You know this.
Okay. And then the other thing that was mentioned in that Interact meeting, I just want to make sure, it said $750,000 to $1 million for a lot?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then, and the $5 to $10 million homes, that was not just the one at the end of the cul-de-sac, but?
That's about
Okay.
the average you keep.
I just didn't want to make sure that was.
These homes are going to be most likely 6,000 feet and bigger, and it's hard to build that for less than $5 million total all in.
Okay.
Well, yeah, welcome to the new world.
I think that's all I had. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Mr. Odo, are you okay with the stipulations as presented in the staff report 1 through 18?
I believe so.
Okay.
To be honest, I think they're just pretty standard ones for a single-family subdivision, so.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, this case does require a public, yes, this case requires a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing to anyone in the room or anyone on Zoom that would like to comment. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am? I'm sorry, could you come up to the lectern, please? Go for it. And if you could state your name, we'll give 4 minutes. If you could please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, my name is Pamela Paul, address 13900 Howe Drive. We're in lot 40. So my question was, on this large 5.5 acre plot or whatever it is, do I understand that that is not going to have any height restrictions? So in other words, the buildings can be as high as they want?
I'll let staff comment.
The code does allow accessory buildings, is not restricted on height. So I'll double check that really quick.
And then my second clarifying question is, we don't know eventually what's going to happen to that area, but did I understand that at some point it could be sold and then broken into lots as the rest of the Sienna Estates?
I would defer to the applicant on that question, but that could always be a possibility.
Right now, it's more valuable as one large lot than anything else, so we have no desire, no intentions of changing it. And the heights that we've got, I can't imagine anything being much more than what we've got now. So, anyway, if that answers the question, let me know.
So when the current residents leave, oh, sorry. So when the current residents leave, will that change the possibilities?
I have no control over what someone else does down the road. It's just not, you'd have to go before city council, I imagine, to change it and everything else. But we have no intentions of doing it because, like I said, it's worth more as one large lot, especially with the barn.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Mr.
Is there
Chair, I would just like to note that future land division or rezoning would come back before this board and be subject to a public hearing just like this is. So I do want to point that out.
Okay, thank
And
you,
I
Ms.
also
Cox.
just would like to answer the question really quick. In Article 4, that accessory structures shall have a height of 15 feet in residential districts. However, agricultural, planned recreation, and planned rural residential, the RPA 5, are exempt from that requirement.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Sir, would you like to address the Planning Commission? Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Rob Fraser. My address is 4608 West 139th Street, Leawood. I am the president of the Worthington Homeowners Association and wanted to find out a little bit more information on what the plan is for the stormwater retention system that will be in this new area.
Okay, thank you.
We've got a new detention area. The one, I'm sorry, you're the HOA president?
I am. I'm Rob.
Rob, okay.
Nice to meet you. We talked on the phone.
Yeah, sorry, okay. Yeah, okay. We've got the 1 acre
Could be across the street.
detention right there. If we got water flowing into it and then out. Why don't you- I'm sorry, let Jake explain his best. He'll know what's going on the most.
Jay Caddock with Schlegel, 14920 West 107th Street, Lenexa, Kansas. This development to the south, the Sienna development to the south, actually accounted for this site, but the associated runoff number that was with that was a lower number, so there wasn't as much accounted for paved area essentially for that. So with working with city staff, we've upped that to each lot is actually accounted for up to 65% of paved area, and that is all being detained within that detention basin that's proposed. And so it'll all be routed down through the street and everything into curb inlets. It'll be routed to that basin, contained within the basin, and then slowly released and tying into the existing Sienna storm sewer located down here.
So is this an underground detention system or is this above ground?
Underground. Yeah, correct. It'll be a dry detention basin that'll fill with water, and then after it's detained, it'll release, and then the water will go through an underground detention system, or underground storm sewer system.
Okay, so is this then like an above-ground lake that will be allowed to run dry?
Yes. And this is why they're part of the subdivision, which is why we set it up originally in case there's ever any, because we always assumed that all the stormwater would go through to the detention pond you have in Sienna, and this is why we set the subdivision, or I'm sorry, the HOA, and they'll be paying dues like everybody else because they will be attributing to it.
Okay. So just to recap as I understand it, so this is open air above ground.
Yes.
As rain occurs, this fills up, and then it slowly will leach, for lack of a better term, into a underground detention catch basin, which will then flow on into Sienna's stormwater retention plan?
I wouldn't say leach. You'll have a small orifice in it that allows it to slowly drain into the existing storm detention pond.
Okay.
So it doesn't overflow. That's why we originally were right on the brink of 35%, or do we go to, you know, we were afraid that we would exceed the 35% coverage ratio. So because we were afraid the homes might be of size and they might exceed that 35%, we decided to just put the additional detention here just to further protect the existing storm system. Is that right? And I worked with staff and everybody. Did I explain that right in very loose layman's terms?
Brian Scoville, city engineer. Yes, the system is designed to accommodate larger impervious areas on these lots. The water will be detained above ground, and then it will drain out into the underground storm sewer system, and the pond will be dry outside of those rain events.
So assuming we get a significant rain, a heavy rain, an unusually heavy rain, this fills up, where does it then overflow to?
So the overflow path would be down through the existing storm sewer system that is there to, that's, you know, it's designed and built to account for the site, just maybe not as much area, impervious area, the paved area, so that's why the basin's being installed to account for that difference in excess paved area. But yes, the overflow path would be down that pipe, basically.
Okay, so it's just basically, it will follow the path of the pipe. Right into Sienna.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough, this was pre-planned back in 2003 that all this would happen. Other than they changed the amount of rain that we have to account for a little bit more, so we've added the additional detention. Did I say it right?
Yeah, and it'll follow the existing path.
Yes.
Talk into the microphone.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, it will follow the existing path that's there today.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, our concern is, while we don't think the water is going to flow that far to the west where we are, we have obviously concerns with Aventino, which that ship has sailed, but we want to make sure that our stormwater detention system is not overloaded. So thank you.
Can I ask?
Yeah, you can ask a question.
So then, if they're paying dues into that to build up a fund for dredging as needed.
They're all part of it now.
Got it. And then the city will review that stormwater detention plan on some regular basis to determine if and or when it needs to be dredged.
The property owner would be required to manage their detention pond. We do require a biennial inspection that's certified by an engineer or licensed land surveyor that indicates that the pond still has the adequate capacity, and then they submit that to the city. So we do review their certification, but we don't do on-site inspections. Typically, it's all handled through a licensed engineer or surveyor hired by the property owner.
Okay, so would the city then, who makes the determination of when it needs to be remediated?
The engineer that does the review will have to make the determination on when it needs to be remediated.
Okay, perfect. For clarification, then it's the city, and then it's the responsibility of the Homes Association to handle. Perfect. Great.
Sir,
Thanks.
excuse me. Oh.
Commissioner Belzer had a question for you.
Yeah, could you repeat what Homes Association you're with, please?
Certainly. I'm Worthington Homes Association, so it's at 140th and Roe.
Okay, thank you.
No, apologies, Worthington.
Worthington.
Okay.
As I said, we're far enough west, and it certainly feels like this isn't going to cause a problem for us, but we're just wanting to make sure. And so that I can speak to my homeowners as to what is the stormwater retention plan for this new development.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I just want to make sure my answers are properly clarified. All of our water is running to Sienna's detention. Correct. Nothing going west. It's all going east.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry for letting that get into an interact meeting. Are there any other questions? I'm sorry, any other people that would like to speak for the public in the public hearing? Anyone online?
Mr. Chairman, if there are
Commissioner
no
Hoyt.
further comments, I'd like to move closure of the public meeting.
Second.
Commissioner Hoyt, motion, Commissioner Block, second. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. The public hearing is now closed. Mr. Odo, thank you for coming up to help us with the public hearing. Is there anything else that you would like to add? No, you're good. Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the case? Commissioner Carlsberg.
I'd like to, for the citizen who's leaving, I'd like to make sure there's some clarification on the parcel that's going to remain, because I think it got bounced around a bit. In the zone it has now, can it go any taller than it is now?
Yes.
So there's nothing to prevent that owner from building up from where they are now?
Let me get staff to comment on that so it's in the record.
Just a second, let me check on the ag. I don't usually use that one that much.
While he's checking on
Commissioner
that, I guess one more comment about the infamous 5.5 acres is, I'm somewhat reassured that the intention is to sell it as a single estate-sized lot. I would like to simply maybe have it on the record that it is suitable for a single estate-sized lot. We had a case come up here a couple years ago where there was a little parcel left over and there was some argument by the owner that, well, this is just not suitable for anything, so other than putting a whole lot of little things on it. But the intent of the plan is, and the expert judgment of the applicant on the record, is that it is most suitable for a single estate-sized lot, which would have to go through rezoning, and we would have to re-examine it no matter what the purpose was that was being proposed. And it's currently zoned agriculture. So whatever the current situation is that allows taller structures to be built, that's the situation right now anyway. So.
And as far as the height limitation in ag, it's 35 feet. So it'd be the same as a single-family house. Actually, ag isn't the only one that is exempted from the accessory height for residential. RPA 5 has the same situation. They're exempted from it as well. And I believe that they also have a height limit of 35 feet.
And if I can add one more thing to the record.
I'm sorry, Mr. Oda, we're already on to the discussion. Thank you, though. Any other comments on discussion on the case? Mr. Block?
Well, I did actually have a question for Mr. Odo.
Mr. Oda?
As it deals with this, just to finish up kind of where Liz was going maybe with this was, so you're a developer and I understand you all want to sell this property, this 5.5 acres in its entirety, and you wouldn't have any control over what happens to it in the future, but maybe just from your expert thought, being a developer, could this lot be divided in half if the house was raised, and does it make sense, I guess, based on this layout and your understanding of development versus mine, which is obviously limited, would that be suitable for two houses, or, as Commissioner Hoyt said, a bunch of smaller things, and that might get into the R3, R4, where you can't have that because of the and this is kind of maybe a question for staff as well. I mean, you couldn't put in, townhomes or something like that because of the zoning around it. So I think kind of going both ways. You couldn't put a lot of smaller things in, or potentially break it in half, could you, or in thirds, or whatever the case is?
I would do everything I could to encourage that not to happen. Don't forget, we still own the property to the north, so I want to make sure that this is maintained properly. When we put the pond or the dry detention basin there, if it was possible before, it makes it harder to do now because I lost all that ground. I mean, most you could do is run a street, a cul-de-sac, but I think we're getting near the limits of how deep a cul-de-sac can go. And if you do bring it back, you might be able to tear down the one and put 2 or 3 houses back there. But I still say that the ground is worth more because there's so few 5.5 acre lots in Leawood that its greatest asset is a whole instead of subdivided. It's not always the case, but in my honest opinion, that's where we're leaning towards, and that's what I'm, wanting.
So, and then one more question just for you. So the dotted line of this 5.5 acres, there looks to be some open space just to the north of that. What's there? I don't know. I'm not looking at an aerial view. I'm just looking at
that open space. If I can get this turned on.
Yes, right there.
Right here.
Yes.
That's the detention pond for Sienna. For Villa Milano.
So it's truly landlocked as far as, either with houses or the only way they'd be able to get in is through the end of that cul-de-sac.
Exactly. Okay. And I can tell you, it is not our intention to do that. Once again, we feel like it's best asset. And I do foresee that the pool house being rebuilt because it's a 45-year-old non-functioning pool house. I can see that happening. But other than that, I don't see much happening. The barn is on the far north end, as far away as possible from, getting all my subdivisions confused, Sienna. So it's closer to Villa Milano. I just don't see it happening. I don't know what type of assurance I can give you, but I don't see it happening.
Understood. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. Is there any other discussion from the commission? Okay. With that, is there a motion that anyone would like to make?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Hoyt.
I move for approval of case 90-23, Sienna Estates, request for approval of rezoning from agricultural to planned single-family low-density residential, and that would include all 18 stipulations.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoyt. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Is there any discussion on the motion? With that, we'll call for the question. Is everyone in favor of approving case 9023, Sienna Estates? Please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Unanimously passes to the governing body, case 9023, Sienna Estates. Okay. Thank you. Okay, moving on to case 112-23, Hallbrook Country Club, temporary golf pro shop and cart storage tents. Staff have a presentation?
We do.
Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission, this is case 112-23, Hallbrook Country Club, request for approval of a special use permit. The applicant is requesting approval of a special use permit that will allow for the use of a temporary golf pro shop and a cart storage tent on the Hallbrook Country Club site. These temporary structures were constructed to house the Hallbrook Country Club Golf Pro Shop and cart storage until the construction of the updates to the main clubhouse and new pro shop are complete. These tents were erected prior to receiving planning approval, so this application is to bring the structures into conformance with the Leawood Development Ordinance. The applicant is requesting a 2-year special use permit from the date of governing body approval, which will allow the club the ability to complete construction on the permanent structures and not have to resubmit for a new SUP. Construction should take longer than the assumed time frame. The two structures are located at the northwest corner of the existing main clubhouse building within the club's northern parking lot. The use of the temporary facilities will obstruct the use of 32 parking stalls on the north side of the lot on the site. Per the LDO parking ratios for a golf course, the existing on-site parking is enough to sustain parking until the temporary structures are removed. The tents are constructed using insulated steel panels, tent framing, and PVC fabric material. The tents are braced with base plates and 42-inch double head stakes. No carts are to be stored outside of the golf cart storage tent. The applicant is proposing the use of 3 temporary signs on site to navigate patrons to different specified locations. All temporary signage will be required to be removed once the use of the temporary structures has ceased, and any permanent signage proposed for the permanent structures will be required to come back through the Planning Commission and governing body process for approval. This special use permit meets regulations of the Leawood Development Ordinance. Staff recommends approval of case 112-23 with all stipulations listed in the staff report, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Is there any questions for staff? Commissioner Block.
On a roll. Obviously this is up, so they're kind of more asking for forgiveness than permission initially. But I guess, how does something like this happen? I mean, who discovered it? Did they come forward with it? Did the city discover it?
I believe it was either the fire department or building. I'm not entirely sure.
I thought it
an
was actually
inspector.
code enforcement kind of went by and noticed it, and then came to the planning department and asked if they needed anything, and we indicated yes, they needed special use permit for a temporary use of land.
Yeah, because I don't remember this being part of the discussion when we approved the improvements.
No.
So, I mean, I guess, and maybe it's a better question for applicant, I'm just curious what their thought was, if they did, yeah. This is something that should have been asked for, I assume. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I guess that's all I have for now. Thanks.
Any other questions from staff? I just have a couple questions on this one, Catherine. What was the timeline? So when we approved the facility, and then when was it discovered?
I believe it was maybe a month and a half ago, maybe. It was fairly recent that it was discovered. Building plans were approved about that time frame, maybe a month and a half ago. So they've started working on different things and needed to start shifting over to the temporary structures. So I believe that's when they went up.
Okay. I actually did see the structures yesterday when I went by, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. What are they doing up there? Commissioner McGurn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, from a staff perspective, given the time frame in which this was, the structures were approved, not the unapproved use of the property, and today, and a request for 2 years worth of additional time for the temporary use. Does that fall in line with any building expectation that it would take 2 years?
I believe the requested timeframe was a year originally, or 18 months. Staff recommended 2 years to be on the safe side, to kind of give them a buffer in case they did need extra time, so that they didn't need to come back for another renewal. So
I would take the opposite approach and say that we're incenting them to take all the time that they want, when the reality ought to be, we ought to be incenting them to be finished as soon as they should, so that the fire department has their actual fire access road back. That'd be my opinion.
Thank you, Commissioner McGurn. Any other questions for the applicant, Commissioner
Actually,
Hoyt?
that was going to be one of my points. In the fire marshal's report, they are saying, given the hardship it will create to remove the tent, blah, 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 the applicant assumes the increased risk and liability of creating this adverse condition. I mean, the applicant may be willing to assume that risk, but as decision makers who are supposed to have the greater good in mind, is that really a responsible thing for us to let them do? And I'm throwing that out to the group.
Thank you, Commissioner Hoyt. Any other questions for staff? Okay. With that, we'll ask the applicant to step forward, make their presentation. Welcome to the Planning Commission, sir. Please state your name and address.
Jason Asbra, 11200 Overbrook Road, Holbrook Country Club.
Welcome to the commission, sir.
I wish it was under better circumstances.
We're very interested in hearing your story.
There really isn't one. Obviously, we've been here on a few occasions over the last 12 months, and obviously, had we known that we needed to be here, I can assure you that we would have been here preemptively, doing this the right way. When it was raised to my attention, I think it was maybe about a month ago. I think the first call I made was to Mark. The second one was to Catherine to say, what do we need to do? How can I make this right? Obviously, an oversight from myself and those that we had working with us throughout this project, that it wasn't caught. The planning of what has been constructed was started, I think, back in March or April of this year. So we knew what we needed to do to be able to provide service to our members during the temporary construction, and at any stage throughout that, it was just never brought to our attention. So your questions are valid, outside of just really accepting that a mistake was made. It was my mistake, and trying to make this right is obviously our primary objective at this point.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Hoyt.
So what is your take on the assumption of risk that the fire department is talking about?
I understand. I've reached out to Chief Juicy to also do a site visit, so that way, we can be as proactive as we can for obviously protecting the facilities, the surrounding areas, to minimize that as much as we possibly can. We are obviously in a position and willing to assume the risk, as Chief Juicy has alluded to. I'm more focused on making sure that, I think by your earlier accord, that we're doing the right thing, for all parties, our neighborhood, the businesses to the north of us, to make sure that we're putting ourselves and being a good neighbor for the people around us, in addition to the safety of our members and our guests and the people that are still on property. The unfortunate part here is that the building has been constructed. We have moved in. We are operating out of it. My primary focus right now is to do the best we can to provide safe operating environment for all the parties, the structures, the people around it, and to do what we can to assist the Leawood Fire Department and our police department in the event of a first responder call.
Any other questions for the applicant? Commissioner McGurn.
Please, did you just say that the new structure has been built?
Well, we're under construction, right? So we're under the renovation at this point. But the structure that we're applying for, is alluded by Chief Ducey, it is up. And I think as Commissioner Coleman alluded to, you can drive by and see it. You can walk through it. I've included photos and drone photos of real life photo, what it is and what it looks like today.
So given your expertise, given the site, what's being built, what the anticipated completion date would be what?
As of this morning, we were looking at the latest was, I think, 9/11 of 2024. That's moving by a matter of a few weeks at this point. So the original request was for 12 months. If I'm here 16 or 18 months from now, I've got a bigger problem that I have to contend with that I hope isn't the case. But, whether it's not knowing what the standard protocol here is, 12 months or is it 18 months, I certainly understand your point of view. And in 2 years, that is nowhere near our directive at this point. We're shooting to be open and operational and have everything returned back to its normal condition in September of 2024.
Thank you.
Commissioner Carlsberg.
I'd like to get some clarification on what increased risk and liability there is based on this, and I appreciate the staff's comments too, because I'm not sure I completely understand, except for access. Does that mean a risk to structures? Does this mean health and injury risks? I don't know where we are in this whole spectrum.
Are you looking for me to respond? Mr. Caldwell?
I wish I had the right person. I'm not sure what it is, but to me, it seems that's a one-liner. And when we're talking about risk and safety, a one-liner doesn't do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you're talking about a fire.
If we're talking about somebody's potential health or death, I really take that as one thing. If we're talking about losing a building and that's all, that's kind of something different. Mark, you had something?
Actually, it might be a good idea to actually continue the application until we get those answers, because I agree those are important to have.
I understand the severity of what's, of what you're pointing out, and obviously from our perspective, very much the same. From a golf course, right, the golf course spans throughout the entire area, of the Hallbrook community. There are multiple access points. The fire truck wouldn't be able to get very far, even if it was using that as a point of access. There are other various areas in the event of any kind of an emergency or first responder request that would happen on property, at which point in time, not only would we be directing that, but we'd be meeting them on site to help guide them as efficiently as possible to that location. The structure itself is accessible from multiple ways, and an ambulance, and or a firefighter or a first responder is still going to be able to pull up into that area. There aren't any hydrants located in that area for them to plug into. They're located in other areas surrounding that clubhouse. So from a firefighting perspective, or even kind of, I would say, a medical emergency, there are multiple access points and ways in which, we, in conjunction with our first responders, have the ability to be able to mitigate that at all costs. So from the structure itself, with it being 2 tents, there is fire protection. You'll find the cut sheets on the materials and everything that's being used to construct that. There's fire extinguishers and other elements of that. As I said, I've invited Chief Ducey to come and walk those space to see what else we can do to help their efforts under any scenario.
And I think that's really good that you invited him. It seems that if there was that much access, this line wouldn't be here.
Yeah, it's cause for concern.
That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Well, it does say on point number 2 of the fire marshal's report that the applicant will be required to apply for 2 temporary tent permits pending planning commission approval. So it sounds like you're going to be chatting with the fire chief to get that approval anyway, correct?
Yes, Commissioner.
Commissioner McGurran? No. Oh, I thought you were. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Step back. This case does require a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing, see if there's anyone in the room or on Zoom that would like to comment on case 112-23.
Mr. Chairman, seeing none.
Commissioner Bach?
I'd like to move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Commissioner Hoyt, second. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Closing the public hearing is passed. That moves us up to applicant rebuttal. Sir, do you have anything else that you'd like to state before we move on? No. Okay, thank you. Up next is discussion. Discussion on the application. Commissioner Carlsberg.
I think Mark said it well, that there needs to be more information here. I don't feel like I can vote on anything right now. It seems like this is something that's very much up in the air.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Any other comments?
Agreed.
Okay. That could. Mr.
This
Klein?
would actually be a case that is, basically we have a meeting on the 12th for December 12th, which is the second Tuesday. And that meeting is strictly for the overflow of any cases that come from this one. So this will be continued to the December 12th meeting.
And could we also, as we continue it, kind of decide amongst ourselves if we want to go with more of a 1-year special use permit than a 2-year?
That would be great.
I think there's a consensus for that, looking at the nodding heads around to do one. Is there any additional comment on that?
So if we set 1-year special use permit, would that be 1 year from, let's say, December 12th, if we, or whenever the governing body would approve it?
Generally, it's from governing body approval, and then if they needed to exceed that, they'd have to come back before this body and also the governing body for an extension.
So that would, you know, really build an extra several months into
Right.
the timeline that the applicant has suggested.
That seems reasonable.
So maybe that could be part of your report, or if you feel the same way too, you know, staff wants to do that, this would be an appropriate time to put that change in there.
We'll take a look at that, too.
Mark, do you ever get, does the fire marshal ever come to our meetings to comment? I'm thinking almost this.
Generally, the fire
Generally, no.
marshal is not located here.
This is a good example.
Justin Ducey does an excellent job as far as on his comments, and so he tries to give you as far as a timeline on a lot of these, but I think you did raise a lot of good questions, and we'll try and get those answers for you.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, with that, would someone like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Hoyt.
I make a motion for the continuance of case 112-23 Holbrook Country Club, temporary golf pro shop and cart storage tents, requesting that this come back to us with further clarification from the fire marshal and a revision of the special use permit time period to 1 year instead of 2 years.
And that would be on to December 12th meeting?
To December 12th meeting.
Second.
Second, Commissioner McGurran. Sorry, Commissioner Wilson.
It's okay.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, with that, everyone in favor of continuing case 11223, Holbrook Country Club temporary golf pro shop and cart storage tents, as indicated by Commissioner Hoyt, to December 12th, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. And we will see you again, Jason, on the 12th. So, thank you. Do we need a break, or you guys want to power through? No, we got a break over there.
Quick break's a great idea.
Okay. We will not power through. We'll take a 5-minute break and then continue with case 8523.
Seriously.
They would do.
Well, of course.
Okay, welcome back to the Planning Commission, Part 2. We have saved the best for last with case 8523, Leawood Development Ordinance Amendment to Section 16-4-9, Fences and Walls. Request for approval of an amendment to the Leawood Development Ordinance pertaining to fences on through and corner lots. Which staff member gets to present?
That would be me, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Ms. Kirks, please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michelle Cricks, Leawood Planning Department. This is an amendment to Section 16-4-9 of the Leawood Development Ordinance, which is the fences and walls section of the code, specifically exceptions to height restrictions for fencing on through lots and corner lots. The amendment would allow exceptions to be available through the Board of Zoning Appeals rather than a variance. Currently, the BZA is seeing an increase in variance requests for the replacement of fencing on through lots and corner lots where the fence was constructed prior to the current code. Currently, on a through lot, the code would require fencing to meet the district's front yard setback along the rear property line. On corner lots, fencing would be required to meet an increased setback on the street side of the lot and is generally not permitted on the lot line. As it currently stands, if a property owner needs to replace an existing fence that would not meet the current standard, they are going before the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance. The challenge is that there are 5 factors that must be affirmatively answered for a variance to be considered for approval, and each factor is voted on by the board. Those factors are guided by Kansas state statute, and those factors are: is the property unique and is not an action created by the property owner or applicant? Granting the permit would not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners. Would restrict application of the code, or excuse me, would the strict application of the code constitute an unnecessary hardship? Would granting the variance adversely affect public health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare? And would the variance be opposed to the general spirit and intent of the Leawood Development Ordinance? In most cases, these questions cannot be answered in affirmative, and the BZA is walking into a shade of gray to grant the variance. So by allowing an exception, the request would still go before the Board of Zoning Appeals review. However, it would lessen the review criteria burdened by the applicant, staff, and the BZA, and offers more flexibility for review. Rather than these 5 critical questions I just named, the BZA would consider the effect the fence would have on adjoining property, uses and physical characteristics of adjoining property, proximity to arterial streets, and existing topography. So what staff is proposing is with through lots, staff is recommending an exception to be allowed for all fencing on through lots, regardless whether if it's a replacement fence or new fencing. Staff is recommending that new fencing is included in the exception review to prevent an irregular fence line along a street. With regard to corner lots, staff recommends an exception be considered for replacement fencing only. New fences on the street side of a corner lot would still be required to meet the street side yard setback of that zoning district. This item has been before the Planning Commission during some previous work sessions, and I did include those minutes for your review. And I'm available for questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Hoyt.
Just one point of clarification. So both of these situations, the through lot and the corner lot, would still require an applicant to go before the Board of Zoning, but it would be a fairly perfunctory review. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. It just provides more flexibility for the Board of Zoning Appeals to look at these types of situations rather than the strict questions of granting a variance.
Okay. But the assumption would be that if, for instance, for through lots, it was a situation where essentially to require the setback to be enforced, it would mean that you had an irregular lot line that from neighbor to neighbor. That would be sort of almost an automatic approval. Is that, I mean, I guess we don't know what the Board of Zoning Appeals would do, but that would seem to be one of the most clear-cut situations where that would be granted.
That is a situation that could be considered, is to keep from having a irregular kind of fence line along the street, yeah.
This is something that the BZA has been asking for quite a while. They get a lot of these application requests, and what they see a lot of times is if even you have a rectangular lot, just, your typical lot that goes down a street, with the rear yard being treated as a front yard, then that fence then all of a sudden has to go back 35 feet toward the house, which at a lot of times is right at the back door of the house, and so effectively, they just don't have any room at all. And the BZA has actually been approving these pretty consistently. And so in this way, it's just to make it a little bit more flexible so they have that ability without trying to come up with reasons why the lot may be unique and those kind of things.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Block.
In some of our work sessions, we had some discussions about height. Does the BZA also have the ability to, I know there's a table here, but I guess, where should I look to 4 versus 6 feet, I think was the conversation that was had around that. How will these changes impact that ability?
There is no change to the BZA being able to grant an exception to height. It is now going to be item D of this same section to exceptions to height and location restrictions that the BZA can grant an exception up to 6 feet, but cannot exceed that.
Okay, I guess just the example that comes to mind, I think we were told in the past that like 127th Street, maybe on the south side, that this is one of those areas where happens a lot across from Leawood Middle.
Yeah, 123rd.
123rd, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I thought the conversation was that under how this is written, even with these amendments, that it would only allow a 4-foot fence there, but in practice there are 6-foot fences. It might not, maybe I'm not remembering that right. I guess, would this have any impact on them not being able to replace a 6-foot fence, is what I'm trying to get at.
I think, okay.
Oh, I apologize.
I think they'd have the ability still to ask for a deviation to the height of the fence as well. It's just that they would have this section that they would use as far as for the location, and then the other section as far as for the height. But the BZA can't approve anything larger than a 6-foot fence, so.
Yeah. And for that particular example, that would be fine.
Yeah, because those are 6-foot fences.
I think so, yeah.
Thank you.
I think we also talked about 119th Street across from the church. There's a whole row of fences going back there. Any other questions for staff? Any discussion on the proposed case? Okay. There's no public hearing needed, so is there any motion to be made?
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, this is an amendment to the Leawood Development Ordinance. It does require a public hearing.
Okay.
Doesn't say that.
Doesn't say anywhere that there is, but I will take your word on it. So just in the future, if you could make sure that it's highlighted on both the agenda and on the case number so that we're aware of that, that would be great. Since it is a change to the Leawood Development Ordinance, we'll have a public hearing. I'll open the public hearing to anyone that wishes to speak. Mr. Odo, please come up, state your name and address for us.
Rick Odo, 3747 West 117th Terrace, talking as a Leawood resident here. I beg you to change this, to accept this. My personal preference would be to eliminate it as even needing to go into the Board of Zoning Appeals. It should just be allowed, period. Because I know a lot of friends who this has affected to them when they had to rebuild their fence and they're pulled back to their patio because of it, and it's just not right. It should just be allowed at 4 or 6 feet, whatever the replacement height is. It should just be allowed. And then just like I showed before in my lots, there's no reason that these through lots, did I say that right, should have a restriction on where that is. It should be treated as a backyard to Mission Road and just accept it and not have to go to the added step of going to the boarding zone, the zoning variances. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Odo. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to comment on case number 8523 or on Zoom?
Mr. Chairman? I make a motion
Hoyt.
to close the public hearing.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Belzer with the second. Any discussion on the proposal? If not, everyone in favor of closing the public hearing, please state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Public hearing is now closed. That brings us to discussion. Any discussion on the ordinance? Commissioner Carlborg.
On the table that has a type of fence or wall, location, and height, the very last box talks about fencing and gates for utility and service facilities. Is that utility is in the subdivision sense of things or a public utility sense of things?
I believe that that is actually for a public utility.
I wonder at some point if we talk about it being approved by the planning commission and governing body, but there may be company standards or state standards that I don't know if would be considered in this or not. So that would be a point of clarification. I'm not sure if there is, but there could be.
Yeah, we can take a look at that.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Block.
Just a question for staff. Since public hearing was not identified on the case or on the agenda, is it a possibility that there maybe are people out in the public that would have wanted to comment on this had they known it was? Is it something that we should continue to allow that opportunity?
I would say to be safe that I would suggest that, yes.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay.
Well, just one point, and that is, I do think this is needed to make it easier for people to deal with these situations. And I think this would be a great step toward that. So.
Agreed. Agreed.
It was on the original agenda.
Oh, it is on the original agenda.
Oh, so it didn't,
It just didn't make it to the revised agenda.
yeah, Commissioner Belzer just pointed out it was on the original agenda, but was not on the amended agenda.
Revised agenda.
So
It
there-
was noticed it did meet the notification requirements.
Yes.
As far as in the paper.
Good.
And the agenda, with that being said,
'Cause
since
we
this
didn't
was
see the
given at the very
revised
last
till just
minute, I
tonight.
think we're
Correct.
probably
And
okay.
I don't think that was posted on any website.
Let's vote.
So I will look to the staff attorney just to make sure that we're okay to continue with the vote this evening.
I think you're okay to take action on it.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Thank you, Commissioner Belzer, for keeping all of her paper. That's good.
Good call.
Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Hoyt.
make a motion for approval of case 85-23, Leawood Development Ordinance, amendment to section 16-4-9, fences and walls.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Belzer. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we will call the question. Everyone in favor of approving case 85-23, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against, nay. Ayes have it. Case 85-23 is approved and sent to the governing body. With that, I understand that we are going to have a meeting on December 12th.
Correct.
At least for, is that just for that one case, or do we have other things that are going to appear?
Actually, that's just for that one case right now. And then also the following day, we have the holiday party.
Okay. No one ever misses that one.
We're going to be together a lot.
That's the first time I can remember us being together 2 nights in a row, so. Warn your spouses now. So. Well, with this, I know our mayor-elect's still in the audience, and every time I look up, I see him there, and I'm scared. With that, as we begin, we're going to be down 2, probably until our regular meeting in January, so everyone please put on your calendar. We need 5 to conduct business. So I would appreciate you doing what you can to make sure that we have 5 here for our next meeting, and if we have an early meeting in January. I'm going to try to put all the business on the second meeting. I know that first meeting when we have business, it's so tough to get people. So I'm talking to Mark. We're going to try to put everything on the regular 4th meeting and then put the work session on the second meeting if at all possible.
That'd be
unless
great.
we just can't do it. But with that, let me know if you have any suggestions as we begin anew. We're going to have 2 new members, and we'll have to get them up to speed. I know how hard it is to get up to speed with these things when you're thrust into it. So, anything from staff?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, we're adjourned until December 12th. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.